I still haven't forgotten the weekend nights glued to the TV screen, where Steve Austin and Jamie Summers became living gods in a child's mind. To be honest, I grew up with the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman, to the point of memorizing every single frame, even those episodes rebroadcast for the nth time. There was even a time I was almost hospitalized because of my attempt to mimic Steve Austin's landing jump, fully believing that if I ran slowly in the right rhythm, I would create a miracle, just like on TV. But that was a child's perspective. As I grew up and returned to dissect every frame with the eyes of a scrutinizer, I was shocked to realize the brutal truths hidden behind that perfect shell. The bionic hero was once born as a weapon. The crash in the opening sequence was real, or a crash involving Peterson that permanently ended his flying career.
Today, let's join me in reviewing the files and swinging open the behind-the-scenes doors of The $6 Million Man, 1973.
20. The Bionic Hero was once born as a weapon. Before Steve Austin became America's most beloved Bionic Man, he came from a far darker place. The character was adapted from Martin Caidin's novel Cyborg, 1972, and in that book, Steve is by no means a likable hero. Caidin's original version portrays Austin as a cold, emotionally detached operative who carries out secret missions for the government and does not hesitate to cross moral boundaries. He is more like a human-shaped weapon than a human being, completely opposite to the friendly image Lee Majors brought to the small screen. When adapted for television, the producers deliberately softened things. The network wanted a hero suitable for family time slots, so they added humor and turned Steve into a familiar model of uprightness. A few early pilot episodes still retained some of that edge, but once the series aired regularly, the transformation was complete. The premise was kept, but the soul was changed. Very few viewers know that Steve Austin began as a government-created assassin, not a superhero. 19. The word bionic almost caused a mess of legal trouble. Before the series aired, bionic had been used by several biomedical companies in the US in technical documents and marketing, especially in the fields of prosthetics and body support devices. When Steve Austin appeared every week with bionic arms and bionic legs, a company specializing in the production of prosthetic limbs claimed that using this word on television violated their trademark rights. According to records recalled in television history books and interviews with Universal's lawyers, that company threatened to sue, arguing that audiences would confuse real medical technology with an entertainment product. The producers countered that bionic was a general descriptive term, not an exclusive brand. In the end, the two parties reached an out-of-court settlement. Details were not made public, but Universal kept the right to use the word bionic on air and in tie-in products. Ironically, it was this very dispute that helped the word bionic spread even further. Only a few years later, it officially appeared in English dictionaries. 18. Lee Majors didn't just play a tough guy. He truly lived that way. Throughout the series, Lee Majors consistently insisted on performing most of the stunts himself. That meant high falls, real impacts, and physical challenges that would normally be left to stunt doubles. This approach gave the show a distinctly authentic, gritty feel, but the cost was far from small. Majors was constantly injured during filming, from cracked ribs and sprains to torn muscles. Later, he joked that he should have been paid $6 million just for the hazard pay. One of the most dangerous stunts was the scene jumping from a helicopter to the ground, and Majors performed it himself without hesitation. The slow-motion sequences in the bionic style look gentle on screen, but in reality, they were extremely grueling. He had to repeat every movement over and over, wearing hidden harnesses and enduring the harsh studio lights. In one scene, he suffered a bruised tailbone so severe that he could not sit for many days, yet he still continued to work as if nothing had happened. 17. The bionic sound effects weren't there at first. The cha-cha-cha sound associated with Steve Austin was not actually part of the original plan. In the early episodes, even in the pilot, there were no bionic sound effects at all. Steve would jump over fences, lift cars, or sprint in slow-motion scenes in complete silence. To audiences at the time, these moments looked powerful but oddly lacked impact, as if the climax was missing half a beat. Only after receiving feedback did the producers realize the problem. Then the now iconic bionic sound was added, right as Steve began to run in slow motion, leap over steel fences, or hoist a car in front of stunned onlookers. Interestingly, the effect was not scientific at all, as many people assume. It was created from magnetic tape and electric guitar sounds, then distorted, layered, and slowed down to create an inhuman feel. The moment the sound played, audiences immediately understood. Steve was about to do the impossible. The effect quickly became so famous that it was inseparable from slow-motion action scenes. It was parodied in many shows and gradually became one of the most recognizable sound cues in American television. 16. Steve Austin originally didn't have super strength. In the original concept of the $6 Million Man, Steve Austin's upgrades were limited to speed, vision, and hearing. The producer's goal was to keep the show within the bounds of plausible science fiction. So in the early episodes, Steve mainly ran in slow motion, jumped high, and eavesdropped, rather than flipping cars or smashing through walls. This is clearly reflected in early season scenes, where Steve avoids direct confrontation and relies heavily on tactics. But audience feedback, especially from children, changed everything. According to the writers and Lee Majors, the most popular moments were actually when Steve displayed raw strength. Children imitated scenes of lifting heavy objects more than any other ability. From the middle of the first season, the writers loosened up. Steve began flipping cars, bending metal, and breaking through steel doors. Science was pushed aside, but ratings soared. From then on, Steve Austin was no longer just a high-tech agent. He became a television superhero. And it was precisely that absurdity that turned the character into an icon. 15. The opening did not appear in the original pilot. Unlike most shows of its time, The $6 Million Man did not have a traditional theme song. Instead, the series opened with a dramatic narration. "Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology." That deep, calm voice belonged to Richard Anderson, who played Oscar Goldman. Interestingly, this opening did not appear in the original pilot. The first version used only standard background music, but during test screenings, audiences felt it lacked emphasis and failed to create a distinct impression. The producers then changed their approach, combining real NASA footage with Anderson's narration to turn Steve Austin's reconstruction into a life-or-death event that felt closer to the real world. That decision proved effective. The new opening immediately gave the show weight and a serious atmosphere. It quickly became one of the most recognizable openings on television, frequently parodied in shows such as Family Guy and The Office. The line, "We have the technology," thus stepped beyond the screen and became a pop culture icon. 14. The Bigfoot storyline was cheesy but wildly beloved by fans. Just mentioning the scene of Steve Austin charging through a foggy forest, suddenly confronting a roaring giant creature, and the two colliding in slow motion amid the cha-chow-shi sound is enough to bring back memories of Bigfoot. The role of Bigfoot was originally played by legendary wrestler Andre the Giant, a real-life giant with a surprisingly gentle personality. Behind the scenes, things were nearly chaotic, especially for the catering crew. Andre's infamous appetite was very real. A breakfast of 12 eggs, a lunch of an entire chicken with steak, and his drinking ability became the stuff of legend. One crew member recalled, "I was with him one night when he drank 106 beers." When the Bigfoot storyline proved too popular to abandon, the role was later given to Ted Cassidy,
who had played Lurch in the Addams Family, to continue expanding the myth. And despite its silliness, the scene where Steve Austin gently speaks to Bigfoot, "Come on, calm down. We're friends, remember?" remains one of the strangest yet most endearing moments of the entire series. 13. The accident in the opening sequence was real. In the opening sequence, the series shows an accident believed to have left Steve Austin in critical condition and paved the way for his extraordinary bionic upgrades. But that accident was not filmed for the show. It was real. The footage used in the opening comes from an actual aircraft crash involving the Northrop M2F2, which occurred with pilot Bruce Peterson, who slammed into the ground at 250 miles per hour and tumbled violently 6 times. Remarkably, Peterson survived the crash, but he lost one eye. It was precisely this raw documentary footage that gave the opening of the series an eerie and frighteningly realistic feel. Using a real-life accident not only saved money, but also unintentionally made the show's science fiction premise feel heavier and more haunting from the very first moments. 12. Lee Majors' mustache. In the 1970s, Lee Majors was considered a television sex symbol thanks to his role as Steve Austin, which earned him a huge number of admirers. In the 4th season, Majors and the production team decided to refresh Austin's image by adding a thin mustache, hoping to make the character look more mature and manly. But the audience reaction was completely the opposite. Fans complained loudly, saying the mustache made Steve Austin look unfamiliar and took away the cool, hardened appearance that had become iconic. After only a short time, the mustache was removed and Austin returned to his familiar, clean-shaven look. This became one of the rare examples of television at the time being willing to change a character's appearance purely because of audience reaction. And clearly, in this case, they made the right choice. 11. The Real Mummy of Elmer McCurdy. During the filming of the episode Carnival of Spies, a shocking discovery occurred when the crew began rearranging props inside a funhouse in Long Beach. What they thought was a mannequin turned out to be the real mummified body of Elmer McCurdy, an Oklahoma outlaw who was shot dead in 1911 after robbing a train and getting away with only $46. After his death, McCurdy's embalmed body was sold to a traveling carnival and, over the next 60 years, passed through various sideshows, haunted houses, and wax museums, eventually being forgotten as an actual human corpse. The truth was only revealed when a crew member accidentally broke one of its arms. After the discovery, McCurdy's body was returned to Guthrie, Oklahoma, where it was buried in the Boot Hill Cemetery under 2 tons of concrete to prevent any further exploitation. 10. 6 million was a huge number. In the 1970s, in the opening of The $6 Million Man, the familiar line is delivered cleanly and simply. "We can rebuild him for $6 million. It sounds neat and easy to remember, but in the early 1970s, $6 million was far from a throwaway figure. According to official inflation data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, $6 million in 1973 is equivalent to more than $40 million today. In other words, Steve Austin was not just a bold medical case. He was an extremely expensive military project, comparable to the cost of developing a top-secret weapons system. And that is precisely what makes the show interesting. Steve Austin was not rebuilt out of pure humanitarian concern. He was invested in because he still had practical value. Every slow-motion jump, every bionic limb, every car-lifting moment carries a cold implication. We spent a fortune on you. Now you have to perform. 9. Writer Martin Caidin witnessed Bruce Peterson's accident, and this is where the story truly takes on a chilling tone. Writer Martin Caidin didn't just hear about Bruce Peterson's accident, he witnessed it firsthand. In 1967, Caidin was present at Edwards Air Force Base on the very day the M2F2 crashed. He saw the aircraft lose control and tumble across the dry lakebed at a terrifying speed. He watched the fuselage shatter and twist, and he believed that no one could survive such a sight. But Peterson did. That image haunted Caden for many years, and in 1972, he wrote the novel Cyborg, the book that would later become the foundation for the $6 Million Man. The entire series began with a moment in which one human being stood and watched another come terrifyingly close to death. 8. Peterson's accident permanently ended his flying career. Peterson's accident did more than just inspire a television series. It also brought his flying career to a permanent end. A man who had once tested NASA's most daring aircraft would never again sit in a cockpit. But what is rarely mentioned lies beyond that fall. Peterson did not disappear. He continued working at NASA in support roles until 1971. Decades later, he became head of safety at Northrop Corporation, the very company that had built the M2F2 that nearly took his life. He later participated in advanced aviation programs, including the B-2 stealth bomber project, until retiring in the 1990s. Peterson passed away quietly in May 2006 at the age of 73. 7. The opening shows footage of two different aircraft. If you look closely at the opening of the $6 Million Man, you will notice something rather odd. The accident used as the foundation for the entire series is the real 1967 crash of the Northrop M2F2, a historical event that is not disputed. But what appears on screen is not entirely consistent. Some flight shots and camera angles in the opening are actually footage of the Northrop HL-10, another lifting body aircraft tested by NASA during the same period. The two aircraft look fairly similar, so during editing, they were mixed together without any clear attempt to conceal it. This confusion even carried over into the scripts. In the episode The Deadly Replay, Oscar Goldman refers to Steve's aircraft as the HL-10. But in the 1987 reunion movie, Steve Austin instead says it was the M3F5, a designation that does not even exist in the history of experimental aviation. 6. Dr. Rudy Wells had 3 different faces. Do you remember the operating room scenes with Steve Austin lying motionless under the harsh lights while Dr. Rudy Wells stood above him, calmly making life-or-death decisions? If you watch closely throughout the series, there is something hard to ignore. The doctor's face keeps changing. And the truth is that Rudy Wells, the man responsible for operating on and rebuilding Steve Austin, was actually portrayed by 3 different actors over the course of the show. Martin Balsam played him in the first pilot film. After that, Alan Oppenheimer took over the role in the next 2 pilot films and throughout seasons 1 and 2. Beginning in season 3, Martin E. Brooks became the most familiar Rudy Wells, remaining in the role until the series ended in season 5. 3 faces, 1 character, 5 years of television. And the irony, bordering on dark humor, the doctor who specializes in rebuilding humans with bionic technology ended up being the least physically consistent character in the entire series. 5. The producer's first choice was Monty Markham. Originally, Lee Majors was not the name the producers had in mind for the role of Steve Austin. Their first choice was Monty Markham, and even author Martin Caidin felt that Markham was better suited for the part. However, at that exact time, Markham had accepted a role in a new Perry Mason series for CBS, forcing the team to look for another option, and Lee Majors stepped in at just the right moment. The irony came later. Markham still appeared twice in The $6 Million Man, but in the role of Barney Miller, the $7 Million Man, a bionic rival valued at exactly $1 million more than Steve Austin. The actor who almost became the icon of the entire series ended up playing a character created to surpass that very icon, a very Hollywood kind of ironic loop. I always wonder whether, standing in front of the camera, Markham ever briefly thought, if things had gone differently, the one running in slow motion every week could have been me. 4. Steve Austin discovers a giant footprint. In The Secret of Bigfoot, Steve Austin discovers a giant footprint pressed deep into the ground. And that detail is more real than you think. The props department cast a plaster mold based on the real foot of Andre the Giant, shoe size 24. They only elongated the heel by a few inches to increase the inhuman feeling. The rest was kept almost at its actual size. Producer Kenneth Johnson had 2 identical molds made. One was used for the $6 Million Man. The other mold was brought over and reused by him in the pilot episode of The Incredible Hulk. 2 iconic series of the 70s sharing a single footprint, literally. I always imagine the scene of Andre sitting still for them to pour plaster around his feet, probably not even bothering to ask any further questions. That footprint quietly traveled from one show to another like a behind-the-scenes legend. Sometimes, the thing that makes people believe the most is not special effects, but real things enlarged at the right time. 3. Steve Austin and Jamie Summers are television's first science fiction couple. Steve Austin and Jamie Summers are not just bionic humans. They are one of American television's first science fiction couples. After the success of The $6 Million Man, Lindsay Wagner was cast as Jamie, Steve's love interest, who later also becomes a cyborg. Right from the first appearance, the chemistry between the two characters was so clear that the audience was immediately captivated. That popularity led to The Bionic Woman, which aired on ABC, a completely different network. Even so, the 2 series continued to have crossover episodes, where Steve and Jamie shared enemies, memories, and emotions. There were once plans for a wedding episode. The script was finished, but it was never filmed due to scheduling conflicts. 2. There was almost a third Bionic series. Everyone remembers The Bionic Woman, but very few people know that there were once plans for a third Bionic series. In 1978, the production crew actually finished filming a pilot episode for a spin-off titled The Bionic Boy. The story revolved around a teenage athlete who survived a serious accident and received bionic implants with the hope of expanding the franchise to a younger audience. This character possessed enhanced speed, strength, and reflexes, the exact familiar formula. The problem was that it didn't work. Although the pilot was complete, test audiences reacted quite coldly. Many felt the film was too tame, lacked depth, and did not carry the emotional weight of The $6 Million Man. Television networks quickly rejected it, and the project was archived without being broadcast. For many decades, the Bionic Boy nearly disappeared. Only when science fiction retrospective DVDs were released did a few excerpts emerge. Today, it is seen as an interesting, marginal footnote of the Bionic universe. 1. Kenneth Johnson gave Bigfoot glowing white eyes to create unease. When creating the android version of Bigfoot, producer Kenneth Johnson wanted something unsettling. He gave Bigfoot glowing white eyes. This effect was so effective that Johnson reused it in his next series, The Incredible Hulk. Those white eyes signaled David Banner's transformation, like a danger signal that needed no explanation. That was Kenneth Johnson's Bigfoot technique, a creative choice that became a hallmark for 2 iconic monsters of the 70s. It is the sign of a great idea. It works more than once. Johnson knew what was creepy. Those white eyes still give me goosebumps. It is funny how a bionic Sasquatch taught us what fear looks like. Sometimes the best special effects are the simplest ones. So what about you? Which moment from The $6 Million Man, 1973, is the one you remember most? Leave a comment. And if you want to continue unlocking other deleted scenes from Hollywood's golden age, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. You will be surprised by what Hollywood has kept hidden from you for decades.